Good morning to all, good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Bruno Tertrais. I'm the Deputy Director of the Foundation for Strategic Research here in Paris. And welcome to this webinar on the role of China in the United States in a post-COVID context, a challenge for Japan, Europe, and the Indo-Pacific. So I will welcome first Dr. Michito Tsuruoka, who is an associate professor at Keio University, who will give a Japanese perspective. Then we'll go to Dr. Monica Shansoria, who's currently a senior fellow at the Japan Institute for International Affairs, who will give, I suppose, a more India-based perspective. And finally to Dr. Valérie Niquet, who's a senior research fellow at FRS and also in charge of many of the Foundation's Asia-related activities. Each of them will have about 10 minutes, and then we'll go for Q&A. As usual, you are now familiar with the drill. If you want to ask a question, either you put your question in the chat, or you just raise your hand if you can. So once again, welcome to all, and Michito, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here today. So let me discuss a bit about Japanese perspectives, Sino-American competition, and the Indo-Pacific issues. And first, let me say a few words on a sort of a background about how and where we are. And during the Obama administration, many Japanese officials in Tokyo, both in foreign ministry and defense ministry, were very much complaining about the Obama administration's easier policy. Many people are saying that Obama was too soft on China, and that sort of complaints were there. And now that the Trump administration's sort of rhetoric and the substance of its China policy has changed quite a lot. And now we see heightened tensions between the two countries, the United States and China. And there are growing concerns, to be quite honest. In Japan, there are growing concerns about the state and direction of American-Chinese relations. And in economic fields, this is very much related to of course, the Japanese business and economic interest. Because of sanctions, because of US sanctions against the Huawei and other Chinese companies, the Japanese companies are getting more concerned because there are so many Japanese companies which have been selling parts and other things to Chinese companies, including Huawei. So the US sanctions are very much something that the many Japanese companies are closely watching, following. With a lot of concerns. So that's sort of a economic aspect is there. And there are, I think I should say that there are two sort of kinds of nightmares in Japan. And first nightmare is that the Americans and Chinese are too close to each other, hugging each other. That's sort of a situation. That's what many Japanese don't quite expect and don't quite like. But on the other hand, there are too much tensions and the too much conflict between the two countries, the United States and China, is also a part of another set of a nightmare for many Japanese. So the Japanese often believe that Japan is sort of like a small country sandwiched by two giants, the United States and China. But of course, in reality, Japan is a substantial power. So I believe that there are many things that Japan can do, but the public perceptions sometimes tend to be that Japan is just sandwiched by two superpowers in the region. So the Abe administration that just ended a few weeks ago, on the one hand, yes, there was a strong impression that Abe was always quite tough on China. So a very principled position vis-a-vis China. That's true. But on the other hand, Abe's approach to China was much more balanced and nuanced. And that's something I wanted to emphasize, because it was Abe who started a notion of a third country cooperation between China and Japan in close cooperation, or in close coordination with sort of a BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, despite the fact that Japan didn't join BRI officially. But during the Abe government, there were various talks about how we could cooperate and how we could do things in close association with BRI. And that's what also Abe promoted. And Xi Jinping was supposed to come to Tokyo as a state guest earlier this year. That was prevented by COVID and the pandemic, of course. But so Abe's approach to China was really well balanced, not just on confrontation, but also cooperation was also a very big aspect. And Suga is now inheriting what Abe did, and Suga's approach to China is also quite balanced. So what Japan needs to pursue is on the one hand, we need to strengthen the alliance with the United States. So given North Korean threats and the rise of China, it's just quite obvious that Tokyo needs to strengthen the alliance with the United States. So that's one part. But at the same time, we need to maintain functioning relations with China. So mainly economic relations I'm talking about, but in overall terms, China is our neighbor. And so the alliance with the United States and relationship with China. So how we can manage these two simultaneously. That's a challenge, and that's a challenge that is becoming more difficult, given what's been taking place between China and the United States. So the pursuing both at the same time, relations with the US and China, that's becoming, I wouldn't say it's becoming impossible, but it's certainly becoming more difficult. And so that's one of the biggest challenges that the new Prime Minister, Mr. Suga, is going to face or already facing. And in that sense, I wanted to also call your attention to the fact that Japan and Europe actually share a lot in terms of concerns about the US-China confrontation. Yes, of course, we are allies of the United States, but at the same time, we are not at all prepared to do decoupling from China. So decoupling is a term that we don't want to even think of. So that's why we prefer the term diversification of global supply chains, or the making our economy resilience. It's something that we are now more talking about. And in that context, we are cooperating quite well with Australians and Indians, as well as Europeans, and of course Americans as well. So and today, literally as we speak, the Quad on a foreign ministers meeting is taking place in Tokyo. So they're bringing together foreign ministers from the US, Japan, Australia, and India. So four countries on a foreign ministers meeting. For the first time, it took place last year in New York, and this year in Tokyo. And we intend to make it an annual regular event. So the diversification and making our economy resilient, that's also something that we are very much discussing in the Quad context as well. And of course, Quad is not a exclusive sort of club. We are quite open to cooperate with other countries. So that's why some people have been talking about the idea of Quad Plus. So Quad Plus various countries. So France, of course, or UK, EU, and those other countries and partners sharing values and interests and having technology. And that's quite important. So the Boris Johnson has been talking about D10, or others have been talking about Tech 10. So G7 plus India, Australia, Korea, or there's around 10 countries sharing values. And that's, but various new frameworks yeah, could be possible, but what I think is important is to make these new frameworks as flexible as possible. So it's not a fixed membership, or it's not a fixed formalized institutionalized structure. It doesn't need to be. So they're more flexible, and the membership depends on issues that we want to talk about. And so that's sort of a new Quad or other the flexible frameworks we need to think about in terms of thinking about various challenges that we have in the Indo-Pacific region. So that's it from me for the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Machito. I must say that the seminar that Valerie organized is extremely timely because, as I understand it, the Quad meeting is taking place literally right now as we speak in Tokyo, with also a whole bunch of bilateral meetings at the same time. So I will now give the floor to Dr. Chun Soria, who is also sitting in Tokyo, but will give now maybe a more India-centered perspective. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Bruno, and greetings to everyone in all parts of the world, wherever they are joining us from. I think I'll share a view from India about the subject that we are discussing today, and primarily also discuss the future of multilateralism and security in the Indo-Pacific at large, and then also touch upon the China-India border conflict that happened earlier this summer and which is also going on as we speak, with negotiations still happening between the Indian and the Chinese counterparts. With the COVID-19 spreading devastation and future uncertainty globally, nations are continuing to grapple with the catastrophic loss of human life and the unprecedented damage to their economies and livelihoods. In the post-COVID-19 world, many European countries, and Japan and India, might just have to recalibrate and rethink their respective economic and trade policies to strive to eliminate dependence on any single source of supply in vital areas. Whilst the territorial and border conflicts continue to escalate, the economic dependencies and correlations with China will continue to remain a bitter certainty that these countries will have to deal with. In specific reference to the Indo-Pacific region, a post-2020 pandemic scenario would need a new ocean and security agenda developed that would aspire to devise strategies to boost economic development while protecting the security environment of the Indo-Pacific nations. Partner nations and maritime and multinational maritime constructs need to engage to develop comprehensive maritime domain awareness with an intention that these collaborative endeavors shall aid in securing global commons. A potential China-dominated or controlled world order is likely to yield undesirable consequences for governments that uphold individual freedoms, liberties, rights, and social values as the foremost guarantees of their respective democratic constitutions. Multilateral regional endeavors by regional democracies with similar perspectives and approaches to the rule of international law would remain crucial in their respective partnerships with the littoral states across the Indo-Pacific, aimed at capacity building, developing infrastructure, and contributing to the region's sustainable development. Besides, securitization of the sea lines of communication will remain a primary driver to build upon security and economic partnerships with potential strategic partners across the Indo-Pacific, and specifically the Indian Ocean region, which is known as the heart of the Indo-Pacific. Liberal democracies holding vital stakes in Asia and its future geopolitical and economic order should not let go of the solid foundations and convergences at the strategic level for greater leverage and say in the future security design of Asia by undertaking flexible decisions that are based on maritime border variables to achieve strategic deliverables, especially those that can be achieved multilaterally. The commonality of goals, such as strengthening multilateralism, protecting an international maritime order based on law and international development cooperation, needs to be highlighted as the priority areas for the Indo-Pacific discussions in the future. Multilateral initiatives shall likely propel growth and investment through capacity building, as well as pave way for better integration of the Indian Ocean region, the Indo-Pacific, and its stakeholders. This is also going to further advance sustainable development by addressing developmental challenges, including those that were identified in the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and the 2015 Addis Ababa Action Agenda. The geostrategic and military maneuvers in the past few months undertaken by China showcases its relentless pursuit of status quo revisionism in all its existing territorial disputes, be it in the East China Sea, in the South China Sea, or in the Himalayan borderlands close to India. This is just a reminder that 21st century Asian political geography shall continue to be shaped and reshaped by Beijing's cartographic subjectivity. This brings me to the summer of 2020 to briefly discuss the Sino-Indo border situation. As we speak, India is facing an increasingly destabilizing situation in its border areas with China. The night of June 15th, that crossed over to the night of June 16th in India's eastern Ladakh border region, changed a lot permanently. It changed the basis of China-India relations. It changed the perception that China's territorial expansionism had in fact certain limitations. The Galwan Valley clash is the worst in nearly 5 decades along the Sino-Indian border and has put a loud question mark on China's peaceful rise slogan that was introduced by Jian Pijian in November 2003. A more recent and disturbing security issue in South Asia, which links China and North Korea to the Himalayan nation called Nepal, is one where there is a fast spreading challenge linking North Korea with South Asia. North Korea's cyber threat and operations, it has been brought out, have been linked and found linkages in Nepal in South Asia. The presence of North Korean hackers and widened network of Chinese intelligence present in Nepal and of their collusion has transformed Nepal as a regional base for operations in South Asia by China's state apparatus and North Korean cyber and money laundering operations that target banking and financial systems across the world. North Korea remains China's most vital and proactive client state, and the latter's involvement in Nepal's domestic politics recently has thrown further light on the role and influence of the very critical United Front Works Department in this area. This brings me to the final segment of my talk on the Quad meeting that, as the moderator as well as the previous speaker have brought out, is ongoing as we speak in Tokyo. The COVID-19, my presumption and my take on this would be that probably COVID-19 and its fallout is all likely going to be an echoing background score throughout the corridors of the Quad discussions. A connotative illustration that was displayed by India as a Quad member earlier in August was its decision to dispatch a frontline naval warship to the South China Sea for the first time since the fatal clash with China in the Ladakh border region. India considers the maintenance of stability in the South China Sea as part of the global commons, and this endeavor and this step was seen as part of that initiative. For that matter, this could well be the beginning of a far more robust approach undertaken by the entire Quad, the Quad Plus, and their respective regional partners across the Indo-Pacific. It is more than time that the post-COVID-19 world needs to comprehend an overall reassessment of its China policy in all aspects, including of those relating to economics, geostrategic approaches, as well as humanitarian issues. I'd like to conclude by saying that the Quad countries will have to undertake drastic measures ensuring that the previously linked economic systems, which are heavily dependent on a single source, are gradually made relatively independent enough to operate with lesser dependence on any particular nation, thereby providing naturally enhanced leeway to those nations, their partners, and their regional allies. This would be an imperative step to better secure the stability and geostrategic balance across the Indo-Pacific and beyond. I guess I'll stop here. I look forward to the discussions and the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica, and thank you to both Michito and Monica for staying on time. I appreciate the fact that we will have time for questions and answers. I will finally give the floor to Valérie, who is the initiator of this meeting, and Valérie will give, I suppose, the more Europe-centered perspective. Valérie, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Bruno, and thank you to both of you for these two extremely interesting presentations. And I will just focus quickly on 3 points on remarks, and just to launch questions and discussions after that. First, I think, and this is true also for Japan, after listening to Michito's presentation, the danger for Europe will be to be stuck, as you say, in between sandwich. We are not sandwiched, or between the US and China, really, but to be stuck in a narrative where the focus in on these US-China tensions on Cold War. The Chinese like to remind us of that Cold War type, as if it were not significant for the situation today. The danger would be to put the two at the same level, whatever the problems we may have with the Trump administration, not taking into account the specificity of the US, a democracy, sharing our values, and above all, our ally. And on the other side, you have China, a systemic rival, to put it mildly, as did the EU recently. And the problem is that we do not really have the initiative in bettering relations with China. This is a problem, whatever you want to do. If China wants better relation with us, it will be very easy. I'm sure Japan will be the object of a lot of courting from China, starting from now. If Japan does the right thing, the business, it will be good for them. So, I mean, if they want to have good relation, they are very open in building these good relations. If suddenly it changes because of internal political factors, whatever Japan or EU or even the US does, it will not change. And of course, the main partner for China remains the US. So I think this is a point that we have to keep in mind, that whatever we do, we have to think that China will lead what they want to do, unless there is a lot of pressure applied on their decision-making structure, and that it plays in favor of more strategic stability, maybe. So this is a very important point for Japan and for the European Union, and of course for India, but yet India is facing a very, very concrete challenge from China, so the situation is very different. So what role can the EU and member states play? Here, one of the major debate, there is a necessary one, and among member states. Some of the European Union member states, the most liberal ones, people say usually the Northern Europe or the Netherlands, or in a way Germany, they tend to stick to a kind of should I say naive delusion that you can get both. You can have your cake and eat it too. Meaning you can have US protection and support, but business with China. And once again, this is also a dilemma that Japan is facing today. You can not choose between the two and just say it's their problems, not ours. I'm not sure about that. And actually, I'm very proud to say that in recent months, EU has clarified a lot its position regarding China, and particularly the two, should I say, the Franco-German couple with the publication of the new Indo-Pacific, strategy in Germany, following after a few years the one published by France. By the way, we are still expecting the one might be published by the UK one day. We will see after Brexit what happens in London. However, there is, as I say, an evolution towards a consensus on China in Europe, as there is one that we see functioning for the time being, at least, between Democrats and Republicans in the US. So the situation in the US will not change drastically if Joe Biden were to be elected and chosen in November compared to Trump. I think the situation is extremely, as you said, tensed between the two, but I'm not sure the tension is exclusively because of the US US policy of trade sanctions, for instance, against China, even though I agree that it poses a lot of problems to big companies, high-tech companies, for whom Huawei, for instance, was one of the major clients recently. So we need a better, what we need actually is a stronger, and we are trying to do that here, and in following webinars we will organize, we absolutely need a stronger ongoing dialogue, both with Japan, India, and the US, and the EU, France, of course, but not only France, on China. This is a must, and it can be, of course, one-sided. The European Union member states cannot be, this is also important for our American friends, and I think this is something which is felt, including in the Quad. The member states, of course, cannot be dictated. They must be, in my view, realist on China, but they cannot be dictated, I don't know how you say in English, but dictated by the US, as if nothing had changed at the EU level regarding our position vis-à-vis China. As I said, both French and Germany now have this Indo-Pacific strategy, and even if and it shows that there is an increasingly converging analysis on the issue of China that has to be recognized, including by the US. And just to conclude, I don't know exactly where, a few minutes, the dialogue with, as we say, like-minded parties or people or countries who share our preoccupations with China is also a must, as I said. In that sense, the Foreign Minister, Motegi from Japan visit to Europe, where he went to Portugal, because Portugal will be the next Council of Europe president starting in January. It shows his strong interest in maintaining the momentum of not only free trade agreement, but also strategic partnership with the EU. It's extremely important at a normative level, but of also concrete actions regarding what we do in the Indo-Pacific and with China. But also he came to France and met Le Drian. So I think all these points show that there is this momentum from the EU perspective, but also the Japanese perspective and India perspective, must absolutely be preserved, whatever the president in the US, new prime minister in Japan. And I think this is something that we have to go on working on very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valérie. We have 46 participants, so I hope that some of them will come up in the Q&A. Well, I have only one question so far, but before I have several questions coming in the chat, I'd like to ask two broad questions to the three of you. Some of you have addressed them, others not so much, and please answer them if you want in the way, shape, or form you would like to. These are almost layman's questions coming from a non-expert on Asia. First question, is it true that China prefers a second mandate of Donald Trump? Second question, what happens to the Quad in a Biden administration or in a second Trump administration? Because as far as NATO is concerned, an area that I know much better than Asia, I think that for NATO, it's going to be much worse than the first Trump mandate. So is it true for the Quad also? Could it be better? Two open questions and just a few short remarks by each of you. Of course, you don't have to address the two questions. Please feel free to address one of the question or both. So first, Michito, please.
Okay, great questions. There are good reasons to believe that the China prefers Biden, perhaps mainly because of their memories of the Obama administration. So it was easier to deal with the US than Obama. But if you really believe that the Trump administration, continuation of the Trump administration is not in US national interest, or it it will harm US national interest, then that you can argue that that could be in China's interest to see the second Trump administration. So that sort of argument, I think it's very much shared by Russians as well. So I have no clear answer, but there are both the reasons for two positions. And Quad under Biden or Trump second Trump administration, I think the momentum of Quad is likely to continue, because it's very much in the US interest for Trumpian people as well, because it is very much about cooperating with the countries sharing values against China. So this is something that the Pompeo and Trump and others very much like. And in Biden as well, the Quad can be seen as a example of wider international cooperation. So that's very good for internationalists. So in both ways, I think the Quad is a very good thing, and likely to continue.
Thank you, Michito. Dr. Shinsoria?
Well, I think I would seemingly agree with what Suroka-san was speaking on China. I think China will be more comfortable, if I can use the term, dealing with a Biden administration, because Trump has been known to have a slightly hardline policy when it comes to certain very, very critical issues, including trade and on other issues as well. And more recently, we saw Secretary Pompeo categorically making many references to the role and the influence of the Chinese Communist Party. So he has been more specific in referring to the internal political dynamic within China, and the tensions have only risen post-COVID, and the situation has not gotten any better. As far as the Quad, whether under Biden or Trump, I think as long as the Quad is able to streamline tangible initiatives that it wants to undertake, as the four-nation Quad or as the Quad Plus that I referred to earlier, I think it would be immaterial whether it's a Biden or a Trump administration. The focus has to be getting those initiatives identified and cracking on those initiatives. And Quad has to go beyond just being a talk shop. So I think that is something that really needs to be the focus right now, rather than, which respective administration it will be.
And now I am confused, because 6 months ago, I heard several experts of China who were telling me that the Chinese preferred a second Trump administration to a Biden administration. So I am not here to say who's right and who's wrong. Maybe the passage of time, maybe 6 months later, or maybe there are just diverging views. Anyway, Valérie, please.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I totally agree with my two colleagues that China never was attracted by the Trump administration initially when he was elected, just around his election first time. The Chinese thought it would be good with Trump, they could make a deal with him. And then, let's not be politically correct. The anti-Trump that I do share in many ways, sentiment is so high that quite a lot of analysts tend to focus on, anyway, it's so bad that the Chinese would still even prefer Trump to Biden, and Biden would be much better. I think, contrary to some hyper-conservatives in the US, that Biden will not change a lot. On people around Biden that we knew before, by the way, I don't think Obama was so bad on Asia. He was the one who initiated the rebalance to Asia, even without as many capacities as people hoped for. But there is a continuity between Obama policy towards Asia and Trump, including disengagement from Europe, from other fronts, to refocus on Asia. So this is very important. But I think the Chinese discovered that Trump was extremely dangerous for the internal stability of the system and its image as powerful, including in innovation. Look at what is going on. That country was perceived to be the leader of innovation in the world. Now you see their biggest high-tech firm just proclaiming that without the imports of American technology, directly or indirectly, they must shut down almost. So, I mean, the image of China, because of Trump, not including trade and so on, has been very much destroyed. And I don't think they want that to go on. The only thing that we may be afraid of regarding Trump is that he might change. That's true. He's still not predictable. And he might decide that, after all, resuming better relations with China for the sake of the economy or whatever could be a good choice. So we don't know. But I don't think that the Chinese now are waiting for the next Trump presidency. On NATO, I'm not at all a specialist of NATO. The only thing I know is that there is a lot of ambiguity, both at NATO, but also in East Asia, Japan or whatever, about Asian NATO, more cooperation with NATO. NATO is already being more focused on the Asia-Pacific. So I think this is really an issue to debate among ourselves. But also, we cannot defocus from the situation in Europe and broader around Europe's situation, as you know, extremely tensed also. So this is also another dilemma, what to do with NATO regarding outside powers, both in a positive or a negative sense, like the role of China and so on.
Thank you, Valérie. Now I have 3 questions coming. So 2 in the Q&A and 1 in the chat. I will take that in the chat, but please put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat, please. So 2 questions from the Q&A. First, from Rameshwar Roy, do economic concerns override national security issues, particularly territorial disputes? If yes, would we see more security alliances than economic ones post-COVID driven by USA? I think this reflects a broad concern, but I'm not sure one can give a clear, specific answer to that question, but I still put it to the floor. Second question, the US have strengthened their support for Taiwan and are moving towards clarifying their strategic ambiguities on the Taiwan issue. I'm not sure they are moving, but maybe we want to discuss that. Do we see a trend in India, Japan, and Europe for stronger position in support of Taiwan? Then there's a question on how the issue in the South China Sea, how is it factored in the discussion vis-a-vis the Quad, French, and German Indo-Pacific policy? So I have these 3 questions right now. I suggest we take a shot at the 3 of them simultaneously. Once again, please address those you feel like addressing. Don't feel like that you have to address the 3 of them. And I will give the floor in the same order. First to Michito, then to Monica, then to Valérie.
Okay, that's great. The great set of questions. And first, the economy versus security, yes, that's always a issue. The diplomatic answer is that both are important, and but it's not just a diplomatic answer. It's just a reality, because I don't think there is any consensus in Japan on how to deal with China. So we have various kinds of interests vis-a-vis China: security interest, economic interest, political interest, and other interests. So there are a different group of people focus on different aspects of interest. So if you talk to Japan Coast Guard, for example, who is in charge of maintaining the maritime security and the maritime law enforcement, and for them, they are very much focusing on Chinese ships coming close to Japanese territorial waters, or sometimes intruding into Japanese territorial waters. So for them, they are. So for them, the maintaining status quo in the maritime sphere, that's their priority. But if you talk to business people in Keidanden or other business associations, their perspective is that they want to do business and make money. And it's their business. That's why they are there, because they just don't want to be disturbed by political tensions or security tensions between the 2 countries. So but that's their job, and that's very much part of Japan's national interest. So there is no consensus. So of course the government at the end of the day is in a position to prioritize various kinds of interests. So the security interest, that's very much a fundamental. So of course, that is why I don't think we should compromise our security interest, including or specifically the territorial integrity of Japan. So that's very much a high priority issue, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't care economic interest, because the economic aspect is very important. The Taiwan issue is still really very controversial in Japan. So in terms of maintaining good relations with Beijing, so in political terms, that's still quite important thing. But there are increasing number of Japanese, including politicians, as well as experts or journalists. They are more and more talking about Taiwan these days. So importance of Taiwan and Taiwan's democracy, human rights, the Chinese pressures to Taiwan's democracy, human rights, and those issues as well, or the security aspect. So it used to be that it's a sort of a political taboo topic, but now it's no longer the case, and more and more people openly talk about that. But when it comes to security and military things, about what Japan can do in military contingency regarding Taiwan, still we are in a very early phase of thinking about what we could do. So yes, it's quite true that we could discuss more and we could be more prepared. Yeah, that's for sure. And but the things are evolving. But still, the process of that is still quite slow. Thank you.
Thank you, Michito. Monica?
On the question of economic concerns riding over national security issues, I think Asia has been facing this model for such a long time, with so many Asian countries having territorial disputes, and how the economic, for decades we have seen economic convergences, quote unquote, going alongside the strategic divergences or the territorial and boundary disputes that have been at play. But as time went by and as decades went by, this very tough balancing act which was being done in order to maintain an economic relationship and at the same time have existential territorial disputes or boundary disputes, border related issues, we saw that the balance kept turning in favor of a particular country as opposed to the rather developing country which needed that kind of an aid. For example, let's just take the Belt and Road Initiative for that matter. In the name of providing economic aid and loans and grants, there have been many smaller countries, littoral states, island nations, who have been desperately looking for infrastructure investments and economic investments from China. And at the end of the day, we have had umpteen examples where the security apparatus or the security of that particular country, China has sort of increasingly had an ingress into role playing in that particular arena. So both have always gone hand in hand, but I think post-COVID, a very serious reality check, as I reiterated in my talk, it has to be taken as to whether can security be compromised in the name of economic convergence or economic cooperation. So that is a very tough call to make for any policymaker, and I'm sure that must be the case in Asia as well. On the question of Taiwan, yes, definitely post-COVID again, the role of Taiwan, especially the manner in which it went out and provided aid and help for COVID relief efforts, that has been appreciated all across Asia and around the world. And Taiwan increasingly will become an important point of discussion, which earlier had been, because of the adherence to the One China policy, it was not being spoken to in as many explicit terms. It was more reticent. But I think now the role of Taiwan is going to be far more important. As for the last question on the issue of the South China Sea factoring in the Quad, I think the very basis of Quad discussions has always been adherence to the rule of international law, free passage, and ensuring that waterways remain free. And the South China Sea definitely is at the heart of all these discussions. I would also like to link this to an earlier point that was made by Valerie about Obama bringing back the focus on Asia, especially the South China Sea. But at the same time, it's a critical point to note that it was under Obama's watch that the militarizations of the South China Sea islands happened. It is also a point to note that it was under Obama's watch that the Scarborough Shoal, the entire debate around how China was able to change the status quo without actually getting into conflict in the Scarborough Shoal issue happened. And in fact, that became a reference point for all the subsequent territorial quests that sort of quote unquote China indulged itself in. So I think all these factors also have to be kept in mind. So I'll stop here and back to the chair, please.
Thank you, Monica. Valérie?
Yes, quickly to come back to that question of the economy versus security. Of course, both should or be able to go hand in hand. Regarding the situation focusing on Japan, what is fascinating is to see, and this is not only Japan, this is also all this extremely provocative diplomacy and attitude China started to take, particularly during the months at the beginning of the Covid-19 in Europe, and but also in Asia, Japan. Regarding territorial issues with Japan, we saw almost 3 times, I think, more encroachment on activities of Chinese ships in waters surrounding the Senkaku Islands, the longest stay in territorial waters in July than we saw before, the year before. So I think it's extremely, as you said, this is a real dilemma, and it's very difficult to balance having better, closer relations, not risking to be punished by China, which is also China loves to do with embargo on some materials or whatever. So the economy cannot be independent from the tense and hard security relationship you may or may not have with China. And this is true for every country. Look what is going on in Australia, the Philippines, Japan a few years ago with a rare earth issue, and even Europe, Norwegia. I mean, all these countries have been punished economically by China for reasons related to security issues. And about South China Sea, just one word. It's for France, for instance, this is also at the heart of our principled position about the freedom of navigation, rule of law. And Minister Le Drian, now Minister of Foreign Affairs, he was previously Minister of Defense, has been extremely active in activating a very intense position and activities of France as much as we can, of course, in terms of capacity. French military capabilities are very much extended on many fronts in Africa, including in Africa, for instance. And we will never replace the US or whatever, but I think it's important also as a permanent member of the United Nations Council that France is constantly reasserting, including during the last visit by Foreign Minister Motegi, its very strong position on this issue of the South China Sea and East China Sea.
Thank you, Valérie. I would add to that there was recently, I think 2 weeks ago, a common position by the UK, France, and Germany on the South China Sea, which I thought was of note because it's not every day that European countries take a strong stance on this particular question. Now we have 10 minutes left, and I see 4 additional questions. So once again, I will give the floor to the 3 panelists, and you will address those you want to address, because I'm not sure you can address the 4 of them. a question from, first of all, a question of the role of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Second question from our friend Brigitte Ades. What do we see in terms of the prospects for additional aggressive moves from China in the region? Another question on the evolution of the Quad and how it affects pressure for countries in Southeast Asia to choose between US and China over the short and longer term. And finally, two other questions. Another one on the Quad, which is, will the Quad agenda accelerate bifurcation of the global economy? And finally, there's a more historical question. I'm not sure we'll have the time to address it. Was it because of the United States during the Obama administration was it because the US during Obama dropped the ball on the issue of South China Sea that China was able to expand its presence, i.e. Scarborough Shoal, etc.? Slight comment from me. I have some recollection that there was some tough language from the United States and from Secretary Clinton in particular about the South China Sea, which I'm not sure one could characterize the Obama administration as being too soft on this. I mean, not exceedingly soft, but that's only my personal judgment. I will stop about the questions because we only have 9 minutes left. So 3 minutes each, 3 for Michito, 3 for Monica, and 3 for Valérie. Michito?
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And first on Southeast Asia, they are very much increasingly afraid and concerned about a situation where they will have to choose sides between US and China, of course, and they don't want to do that. But Japan doesn't want to do that as well. So of course, in the Japanese case, we have an alliance with the United States. So it's a sort of a foundation on which we could think of other issues. But still, the choosing the United States should not mean that we abandon relations altogether with China. So the ASEAN and the Southeast Asian and the countries, they are really sensitive about these issues. So we should not be seen as pushing them to choose. We should not be seen as forcing them to choose. That's, I think, is really important. So that is why we need to be quite sensitive to their concerns. So not just individual Southeast Asian countries, but ASEAN as a whole. It's something that we really need to respect. And in that sense, the fact that Prime Minister Suga is to visit Vietnam and Indonesia as his first foreign visit, I think it's really a great message that we care those areas, because whenever we talk about Indo-Pacific, Southeast Asia is literally, in geographical terms, at the very center of the wider Indo-Pacific region. So the importance of the region is quite obvious. The South China Sea issues. Japan has been stepping up our engagement in the South China Sea, and the US under Trump has been doing more things, including a freedom of navigation operations there. But still, the structural reality is that it's easy for us to say that we are against any change of status quo by force or coercion in the South China Sea, but Chinese are fully aware that it's really difficult for Japanese, Americans, and others to really resist what China is doing there. So they know that the stakes are much higher for Chinese. And despite the fact that we say that South China Sea is an important issue, but still the stakes are a bit lower for Japanese and Americans and others. So there is still a huge gap between the level of sort of a commitment to do physical things there. So Chinese are more determined to advance their agenda, including militarization of those artificial islands in the region. But we are not prepared to physically resist that or counter that. So that's sort of still the structural reality is there, and the Chinese are fully aware of that, and how we can show that we are now more committed. So that's a huge sort of homework for not just Japanese, but also for Americans and others as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michito. Monica, the floor is yours.
I'd like to take on the question on whether we foresee more aggressive moves from China in South China Sea, Southeast Asia in particular. I think if just the last 6 months are to be taken into account, the relentless actions that have been undertaken by Beijing, they emit signals of having a posturing which is rather aggressive across the Indo-Pacific. It began sometime around May, in April and May, when the Chinese Navy warships they sank a Vietnamese fishing boat near the Fulin Islands. Thereafter, we saw Air Force undertaking 36 hours combat exercises near Taiwan. The same day, the PLA Navy Air Force aircraft flew through the international airspace between the Japanese islands of Okinawa and Miyako in the East China Sea. It was just a few days when all this happened that you had Chinese Air Force conducting long-range military drills with multiple kinds of aircrafts across the Bashi Channel. Bashi Channel is extremely important in geostrategic discussions because it's a strategic waterway between the Philippines and the Taiwan island of Orchid. So it connects the South China Sea with the Western Pacific Ocean. So for them to conduct an exercise right at this channel was very, very vital and significant. And all this while these activities were going on in the South China Sea and in the East China Sea, we had multiple live fire drills carrying in Tibet, in the Himalayan region bordering India. So I mean, basically the point I'm driving it as is that China has been taking these rather offensive military maneuvers, strategic posturing at multiple levels. They have opened multiple fronts, whether it is with India in the Himalayan border areas, in the East China Sea or the South China Sea. And if this small trailer is anything to go by, the 6 months, I think the coming time period is going to be, anyone's guess is as good as mine, but definitely we don't really see China backing off. We see an aggressive China, very, very clear of what its geostrategic ambition and its thought for Asia is, and to sort of build upon that from strength to strength. So I'd like to stop there.
Thank you. And finally, the final word is for Valérie, who may want also to add some concluding remarks because she was the initiator of this seminar. Valérie, I suppose we can have a few extra minutes after 11, if that's okay. But so take your time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. About aggressive potential actions by China, of course, a question which is coming to mind to many is what will happen around Taiwan. And this is very much related to the situation inside China. That is, of course, much better apparently than the situation in other countries, including, of course, the US or India. Japan is doing better, but what China will do about Taiwan to retaliate against this increase of visibility and legitimacy that Taiwan seems to have gained during the COVID-19 crisis, where Taiwan now is very much, as Michito said, on the map, contrary to what was going on before, and very much more perceived as legitimate in terms of a democratic country. Of course, following what happened in Hong Kong and the completely falling apart of the one country, two systems slogan that doesn't work at all for Hong Kong. So I think this we must prepare because we don't know exactly the level of instability, tensions that do exist in China and might lead out of delusion the leadership to maybe try something in, not maybe on Taiwan, but in surrounding islands or whatever. So I think for all countries in the region, of course the US, but also Japan in a way, because of the collective security thing and so on. I mean, Japan cannot just stay out of it. And of course, other allies of the US, including in Europe, it's an important point to follow. Just a few words. I'm not very good at concluding remark. I think that this seminar really showed very clearly how stimulating it can be to share our views on this common issue more and more, which is what to do with China, what to do with the US, of course, but the US are still, as I said before, our allies, and we shouldn't have, especially for, I mean, Europe, NATO, and Japan, but we shouldn't have so many questions. We must dialogue with them, absolutely, and in order to dilute some misperception regarding what European thinks and do about China, what Japan do, and what, once again, what is fascinating is how, thanks to China, we are talking more and more about strategic issues, not only the economy, important issues concerning all of us, and not only India, Europe, and Japan, but other countries too, Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. I will not name all of them, but African countries. I mean, all of this because of at least what China did in recent years is force us to think strategically about things that for a long time were not even thought about, particularly at the EU level. And in that sense, I think it's very positive in a way. So I will conclude here and hope we can go on with our discussions.
Thank you very much. I must now conclude this short seminar. I will thank thank you very much to our Asian participants in particular, Monica and Michito. Thanks to all of you who attended this seminar. We were over 45, I think, at some point. And please stay tuned for another FRS organized seminar on Asia. This is something that we will continue to do in the coming months. Thanks for our partners and technical support for this seminar. That's it.
Thank you.
Goodbye
Thank
from
you.
now.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.